That you're tuned in today. I want to welcome all the faithful children that watch every week our Bible lesson. And we're studying through the life of Joseph, and I'm so excited about this story today. I want to say hello to only three of my special friends today. There's three girls that I love very much. They're my friends, and they live in North Carolina. And I want to say hello to Miss Audrey, Eliza, and Jacqueline. And hello from Pastor Cody. I'm so thankful that I get to see your pictures on Facebook, and I hear about your chickens and lots of things going on around your house. And I want to say hi to you today. So hello, Audrey, Eliza, and Jacqueline. I hope you'll have a wonderful day. Let me tell you the story about Joseph. Now, when we left our story, we left Joseph in a terrible place. Who can tell me where we left Joseph? You're right. We left Joseph in prison. And poor Joseph, every time he just tries to do what's right, and he tries to please the Lord and puts God first in his life, but it seems like he just keeps having more and more trouble. But I want you to know something. Do not ever get tired of doing what's right. The Bible says to not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we reap if we faint not. And so don't get tired of doing what's right, because I want you to know something. When you do what's right and you give God glory and please the Lord with your life, He is working all things together for good. And so you keep doing what's right and you keep pleasing the Lord, and you'll see that God is going to use your life to do something wonderful. And here in this story, we see Joseph is in prison. If you remember, there was a butler and there was a baker. The butler was the guy that helped serve the King Pharaoh. And the baker was the guy who cooked all the food. Well, the baker and the butler in prison with Joseph had dreams. And Joseph interpreted their dreams. The baker's goose got cooked, and his dream was very sad. The butler, on the other hand, he was exonerated. He was taken out of prison. He was put back in Pharaoh's service. And he said to Joseph as he left the prison, "I'll remember you when I go before Pharaoh." But guess what he did? He forgot. As a matter of fact, he forgot for 2 years. And after 2 years' time, you see it on our picture here today, after 2 years' time, the Pharaoh, he's scratching his chin. You see that? And he's troubled because he's had an unusual dream that night. And he says, "Let me tell you about my dream. My dream is so unusual." Can you imagine this dream with me for just a minute? Pharaoh said, "I had a dream last night, and as I dreamed, there were 7 fat cows." Can you close your eyes and see a picture of a big fat cow? I'm seeing one right now. So there were 7 big fat cows, and they come walking out of the water. How many of you have ever been to the beach? Can you just imagine you're sitting on the beach, and out of the water, there comes 7 fat cows. They just kind of start coming up out of the water. And that was Pharaoh's dream. It would trouble me too. So that wasn't the end. So Pharaoh had a dream. He had 7 fat cows. They come up out of the water, and they're all standing around. And then there are 7 skinny, little skinny, sick-looking cows that come up out of the water too. But as if this dream isn't strange enough, the 7 skinny cows eat the 7 fat cows. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? Well, his dream doesn't stop. His dream continues, and in his dream he sees 7 big, plump ears of corn. It's summertime around here, and I don't know about you, but I love to eat corn on the cob. How many of you have ever had a great, big, plump ear of corn? You know, that kind of corn, when you bite into it, it squirts your neighbor across the room. That's a lot of fun. So he has this dream, and there's 7 big, fat, plump ears of corn. But his dream doesn't stop there. Not only are there 7 fat ears of corn, plump and hearty and plentiful, there are 7 thin ears of corn. And the Bible tells us in his dream that the 7 thin ears of corn devour the 7 fat ears of corn. I don't even know where you can find the mouth on the ear of a corn, but that's what this dream was like, and it was an unusual dream. And so Pharaoh's sitting here. Do you see him in the picture? He's scratching his face, and he's thinking, and he's burdened. He's like, "I've had this awful dream, and I just don't know what to think of it." but I'm really upset about it. And the butler says, oh no, I've done something terrible. There was a guy in prison 2 years ago, and he interpreted my dream. And he told me what would happen. He said, this is what's going to happen to the baker, and it happened. He said, this is what's going to happen to you, Mr. Butler, and he said it happened. He said, I forgot. He said to Pharaoh, looked at Pharaoh, he said, as he's holding the cup there, he says, Mr. Pharaoh, sir, I know a man, and he is in your prison that can interpret your dream. So Pharaoh said, send for him now. And so he did. Word got down to the prison, and Joseph was doing his responsibilities. Remember, Joseph was faithful to the Lord in the prison. He was not doing his responsibilities. He was honoring, really, he was running the jail. And while he's there in jail, he gets word, Pharaoh wants to see you. He's had a dream. Pharaoh wants to see you. So Joseph cleans himself up real good. Now Joseph is 30 years old. He cleans himself up real good. He makes his way into the presence of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, I hear, boy, that you can interpret dreams. And Joseph does what Joseph always does. He says, now, Pharaoh, I serve Jehovah God. I serve God with my life. And as one of God's servants, I believe God can interpret your dream. And I'll just ask the Lord to show us what your dream means. And so Pharaoh tells him, there were 7 fat cows that come out of the water, 7 skinny cows come out of the water, and those 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows. He says, and it didn't stop there. There was 7 thick, plump ears of corn, and then 7 skinny ears of corn, and the 7 skinny ears of corn ate up the 7 fat ears of corn. He says, what in the world does this mean? And Joseph says, we're going to give God the glory because God showed me what your dream means. God has let me know that your dream means that there's going to be 7 years of plenty. I mean, it's going to be good. Anything you put in the ground is going to grow. The fruit trees are going to bear. The corn's going to be plentiful. The grain's going to be plentiful. The wheat, the pumpkins, the green beans, everything that we grow for the next 7 years is going to be very, very plentiful. But at the end of 7 years of plenty, Mr. Pharaoh, as Joseph was giving the interpretation of the dream, he says at the end of the 7 years of plenty, there's going to be 7 years of famine. And for 7 years, the corn's not going to grow, the cattle's not going to do well, the harvest is going to be very bad, and there's going to be great famine and starvation all over the world. And Joseph said, God has given us this dream and given you this dream so that you can wisely prepare for 7 years of famine at the end of 7 years of plenty. And Pharaoh's like, well, what do we do? Joseph said, I'll tell you what I'd do. He said, I'd seek out the wisest man in your nation, and I would get the wisest man in your nation to take during the 7 years of plenty, to build barns, to set aside and store up plenty of food to last for the 7 years of lean, the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh and his servants, they kind of get an eye, they put their heads together and think, who can we get to do this? You know who they choose? You're right. They chose Joseph. They said, if we want a man that's wise, if we want a man that does the right thing, if we want a man that pleases the Lord, a man that can manage something like this, we need Joseph. And you know what happens? Joseph, because he's continually done the right thing, Joseph moves from the prison to the palace. And you know what God's going to do? God is going to use Joseph in such a mighty way. I want you to know something about your life. You may get tired of doing what's right sometime, but if you'll continue to do what's right and please the Lord with your life, guess what you're going to get? God uses wise people to do great things. And God is going to use Joseph to save the whole world from starvation. It's amazing what he did. And it's because Joseph was wise. God did the right thing. God used Joseph in such a mighty way because Joseph did the right thing. Guess what Pharaoh did? Pharaoh said, you know what, Joseph? You've interpreted my dream. You've interpreted the dream of the fat cows and the skinny cows. You've interpreted the dream of the fat ears and the skinny ears of corn. And he said, Joseph, I'm picking you to be the man in charge. So you know what Pharaoh does? Pharaoh puts a gold chain about his neck, and he puts a signet that represents all the power that Pharaoh has. And Joseph becomes the second most powerful man in all the world. And God uses Joseph in such an amazing way. Just as God said, Joseph's dreams come true. For 7 years, you see Joseph? For 7 years, Joseph led the charge and built the barns and stored the grain. And God uses Joseph in such a mighty way. You know what happens to Joseph? There's a fascinating thing. For 7 years, Joseph leads the charge. Joseph gets married, and Joseph has 2 children. You know, it's easy when things are really hard. How many of you ever had a really hard time? It's easy when things are hard to get distracted and want to do the wrong thing. But Joseph always did what was right and pleased the Lord. And God worked all things together for good. And Joseph, in this 7-year time, he gets married and he has 2 kids. He named his children, the first son he named Manasseh. Manasseh. Isn't that an interesting name? Do you know the name Manasseh means? It means forgetting. Joseph was looking back at hard times, but he wasn't remembering the hard times. He named his son Manasseh because the name Manasseh means forgetting. He said, you know what? God has been so good to me. It wasn't always easy, but God has been so good to me. When he held his little baby boy, he said, I'm going to name him Manasseh because God has caused me to forget all my toil. Then he had another child, a second son. And he looked at his second son. He says, not only do I have a Manasseh, and God has been so good, I've forgotten the hard times, and I'm rejoicing in the glory of God and the good times. He said, I want to name my second son Ephraim. He named him Ephraim, and Ephraim's name meant fruitful. He says, God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. In the very place where Joseph was put into prison and sold into slavery, he's fruitful. And I want you to know something. The devil wants to take the hard times of your life, and he wants to hurt you. But God wants to take the hard times of your life and use them for the glory of God and for your good and the good of the people around you. If you could be a great blessing to your mom and dad, would you do that? Me too. I want to be a blessing to my mom and dad. I want to be a blessing to my sisters. I want to be a blessing to my friends in my community. You know how I can do it? If I'll choose to please the Lord with my life, and I'll give God the glory, guess what I have the promise of? He's going to work all things together for good. I'm so thankful for that. God will help us to forget the Manasseh. God will help us to forget our toil. God will help us to be fruitful, Ephraim, in the land of our affliction. I'm so excited. You know what God does? God uses Joseph in a wonderful way. Not only does God use Joseph to save the whole world, but in our story next week, we're going to see God uses Joseph to save his family. Oh, it's so wonderful. Joseph honored God, and God honored Joseph. Joseph honored God, God honored Joseph. Wherever Joseph was, whether it was the pit, or in Potiphar's house, or in prison, or in Pharaoh's palace, wherever Joseph was, Joseph honored God. God honored Joseph, and God used Joseph in such a wonderful way. I want to be that kind of Christian. I want God to use my life. And there's so much we can learn from Joseph, and I'm excited about telling you more of this story next week. God bless you. If I can ever help you, let me know. I want to hear from you. I'm praying for you, and I love you.